She hadn't been home for Christmas in 7 years. Emma told herself it was because of work, because flights were expensive, because December in the city felt easier than December in Pinebridge. But when she was honest, really honest, she knew it was something else. Home meant memories she wasn't sure she could handle. Pinebridge meant Jake, and Jake meant, well, a version of herself she wasn't sure existed anymore. On a cold Tuesday night in early December, she was packing a box marked winter stuff in her tiny apartment. The radiator clicked and hummed like it was trying its best, but the window still let in a thin ribbon of cold air. She pulled an old sweater from the box, soft, red, a little pilled around the sleeves, and a small wrapped package slid out and hit the floor with a dull thud. "Okay. What are you?" she murmured. It was wrapped in gold paper with a thin red ribbon, the kind her mom used every year. The tag was bent, the ink a little faded. To Emma. From Mom. Her breath stalled for a second. Her mom had passed 3 Christmases ago. Emma sat down on the carpet, the cold seeping through her jeans, and ran her thumb over the tag like it might start talking if she touched it slow enough. "How did I miss you?" she asked, half laughing, half trying not to cry. She untied the ribbon and peeled back the paper. Inside was a small white box with a lid that fit a little too snug. She lifted it, careful, like the air might break. There was tissue paper, and under that, something flatter, softer. A Christmas card envelope. On the front, in her mom's handwriting, "Open on a day you need a reason to go home." Emma stared at the words until they blurred. She slid a finger under the flap, tore it open, and pulled out a letter. It wasn't her mom's handwriting inside. It was looped different, bolder, familiar in a way that made something behind her ribs ache. Jake. She knew it before she read a single word. She knew it the way you know a song by the first 2 notes. "Hi, Em, if you're reading this, your mom did it. She said someday you might need a nudge. So here it is." Emma pressed her lips together. She could hear him. Not his voice exactly, but the rhythm of the way he used to talk to her. Like the world was a little joke they were in on. "I don't know what to write, and I've already restarted this letter 6 times. So I'm just going to say it. I never stopped thinking about you. I never stopped waiting for Christmas to mean you. If you ever come back, I'll be at the coffee shop on Main Street. The old place. You know the one. Jay." She sat there with the letter in her lap, the room buzzing low with radiator noise and the traffic outside. The city didn't care about her finding old letters. The city never slowed down long enough to care about anything. The coffee shop on Main Street, the old place, Daisy's. Daisy's had a tiny bell over the door and booths that creaked when you slid in and cocoa that tasted like actual chocolate and not just hot brown water. They used to sit in the window on snow days, share a cinnamon roll, and split the newspaper like they were 80. Emma read the letter again, then again. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of the old red sweater, and it left a little fuzz on her cheek. "This is ridiculous," she said out loud, even though no one was there to argue. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text from her boss. "Any chance you can do the 23rd? Big client wants a final review before the holidays." Another from her friend Liv. "Holiday market this weekend. Mulled wine calling our name." And then, like a sign she didn't ask for, an email from the airline. "Last-minute holiday fares. New York to Cedar Ridge, Pinebridge." She laughed. Or maybe it came out like a sob. "Okay, universe, I see you." She looked around her apartment. The little fake tree in the corner with 3 crooked ornaments, the stack of takeout menus, the half-full bottle of hand soap she kept forgetting to replace. None of it felt like Christmas. Not the way Christmas used to feel when her mom sang off-key while decorating cookies, or when Jake showed up with a wreath he made himself and pretended he hadn't glued half of it to his hand. She folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope. Then she didn't put it down. She kept it in her hands while she stood, while she walked to the window, while she looked out at the streetlights reflecting on the wet pavement like melted stars. "Go home," she whispered, reading the front of the envelope again. "On a day you need a reason." Apparently, today was that day. The train ride upstate was longer than she remembered, and exactly the same. Trees flashing by like a flipbook, fields wearing a thin white blanket, small towns with names she'd forgotten, each one with a hardware store and a church and a diner where someone named Ruth probably called everyone Honey. Emma leaned her head against the cold window and let the motion rock her. She slept in starts, dreamt in pieces, her mom's hands measuring flour by feel, Jake's laugh from somewhere behind her, the letter in her coat pocket, warm against her thigh like it had a pulse. When she changed to the local bus in Cedar Ridge, the driver glanced at her suitcase and nodded like he knew where she was headed. "Pine Bridge?" he asked. "Yeah," she said. "Pine Bridge." "Good time to come back," he said, pulling the handle and closing the doors. "Town's pretty this time of year." Emma smiled at that. Pine Bridge was always pretty this time of year. They tried extra hard. Lights on every lamppost, wreaths on every door, a big tree in the square that somehow looked exactly the same every December, like it had a contract. She got off by the pharmacy, the air immediately sharper, cleaner. The snow under her boots squeaked, the way good snow does. She pulled her scarf up over her nose and just stood there for a second, breathing, letting the town soak into her. There was the bookstore with the cat that hated everyone except small children. There was the barber shop where Mr. Nolan never stopped talking and never cut your hair the way you asked, but somehow you forgave him. There were the fake candles in every window, flickering like the whole town had agreed on a mood. Home. She walked past Daisy's without meaning to, her feet taking her there like they had muscle memory. The bell over the door still did the cheerful little ding. The warmth hit her cheeks and made her eyes water. "Welcome to Daisy's," someone called from behind the counter. "I'll be right." "Oh my God, Emma!" Daisy herself came around, arms open, flower on her apron like a signature. "Look at you. You're grown." "I was grown before." Emma laughed into her shoulder. "Not like this," Daisy said, pulling back to look at her face. "You have city eyebrows now." "That's not a thing." "It is. Sit, honey. I'll get you a cocoa, with the good whipped cream." Emma slid into a booth by the window. The vinyl squeaked the same way it used to. Outside, people walked past with paper bags and puffy coats and cheeks like apples. The letter in her pocket felt heavier now that she was here, like it knew there was a part of the story she hadn't read yet. Daisy set the cocoa down in front of her, the whipped cream crowned with a pinch of cinnamon. "You staying long?" "I don't know," Emma said. "Maybe through Christmas." "Well, that's long enough to remember why we like you." Daisy winked. "You seeing folks while you're here?" "My aunt, probably. And—" "I don't know," Emma said, trying to sound casual and failing. "Does Jake still come in?" Daisy didn't pretend not to know who she meant. Pine Bridge didn't waste time pretending. "Sometimes," she said like it was weather. "He works over at the garage with his dad most days, helps set up the tree in the square, still drinks his coffee too black." Emma smiled into her mug. "Yeah, that sounds right." Daisy rested a hand on her shoulder, gentle. "You don't have to decide anything today. I know. Drink your cocoa, walk by the square, go see the tree. Okay? And eat a cinnamon roll." "I'm not hungry." "Liar." They shared a look that felt like being 12 again. Daisy slid a plate onto the table anyway, the bun glazed and warm, the kind of warm that makes icing slide just enough to be perfect. Emma tore off a piece and popped it in her mouth. It was as good as she remembered and worse, because remembering hurt a little. She chewed slow. She looked out at the street, People were taking pictures in front of the big window display at the craft store, where a mechanical train went around and around, because not everything needs a destination to make sense. The bell over the door dinged again. Emma didn't turn at first. She didn't want to be the person who whipped around every time she heard footsteps. She took another sip of cocoa, and then, very slowly, let herself look. It wasn't him. Of course it wasn't. It was Mrs. Klein from the post office, with her hat that looked like a pom-pom exploded on it. Emma waved anyway. Mrs. Klein waved back, like she'd been waiting all morning to wave at somebody. "Tree lightings this Friday," Daisy said, like she'd been listening to Emma's thoughts and decided to hand her a map. They made the star brighter this year. The old one flickered like it was flirting with a blackout. Emma laughed. "I'll be there." She left Daisy's with the cocoa in a to-go cup and the letter still in her pocket. The air felt like peppermint against her face. She walked toward the square without trying to, because that's what you do in Pinebridge in December. You go where the lights are. The tree was there, tall and bossy, strings of bulbs like necklaces draped over its shoulders. 2 guys were on ladders adjusting something near the top. A third stood below, holding the ladder steady and calling up instructions. Emma knew the back of his coat before she knew his face. She knew the way he tilted his head when he was concentrating. Some things don't leave you, even when you leave them. She stopped at the edge of the square, halfway between wanting to run and wanting to root to the spot. Her heart did something weird, skipped, stuttered, then picked up like it remembered how. The guy on the ground turned a little, just enough for the profile to be undeniable. Jake. He looked older, sure. They both did. But the line of his jaw, the calm in the way he stood, like he could hold the whole ladder and the whole town and be fine. That was the same. He said something to the guy above him and laughed. The sound reached her a half-second later, like it took the cold air a moment to carry it. She could walk over. She could say hi. She could make a joke about the star flirting with a blackout, and he'd smile because he always got her jokes, even the ones no one else laughed at. Or she could stand here with her stupid to-go cup and her stupid letter and wait until her legs decided which life they belonged to. "Em?" a voice said, not his, close and warm. Emma blinked and turned. It was Nora, her high school friend who used to do ballet in the grocery aisle. Nora had 2 kids now, a knit headband and the exact same eyes. "No way, you're here." "I'm here," Emma said, and let herself be pulled into a hug that smelled like vanilla and playground dirt. "You look amazing," Nora said, like it was a fact. "You always did, but now you look like magazine amazing." "Stop," Emma said, laughing. "How are you?" "Good. Tired. Mostly sticky. We're decorating tonight, you have to come by, and—" Nora's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Oh my gosh, he's right there." Emma didn't look. That felt like it would be the same as falling. "I see him." "You going to say hi?" "I don't know." "Want me to conveniently need help on the other side of the square, so you just happen to walk by?" Emma smiled. "I forgot you were an agent of chaos." "I'm a mom now," Nora said. "Chaos is my brand." They stood there together for a moment, like they were back in a freshman year waiting for a ride, the future big and unspecific. "Come by later," Nora said. "Seriously. If you don't, I'll hunt you down with gingerbread men." "Terrifying," Emma said. "I'll come." Nora squeezed her arm and jogged off toward a stroller that had begun its own small revolution. Emma took a breath, then another. The guys on the ladders climbed down, all arms and rungs and clanking metal. Jake clapped one on the shoulder and stepped back to look at the tree, hands in his coat pockets, assessing. He turned a fraction more, and this time his gaze swept the square and landed on her. It didn't feel like a movie. It felt like the opposite. like the way real life surprises you by being small and huge at the same time. His mouth opened like maybe he was going to say her name, then he just smiled. Not the smile he used to use when he wanted to get away with something. A smaller one. Careful, like he didn't want to scare the moment. Emma lifted her hand in a little wave that said, "Hi, yes, it's me. Please don't come over unless you want to, because I might forget how to breathe." He nodded, the smile widening a fraction, and patted the guy next to him like he was wrapping up a sentence. Then he started walking toward her. Her heart was a drum line. Her brain was an empty stage. The letter in her pocket felt like it might burn through the fabric. "Hey," he said when he reached her, stopping with a respectful space between them. Up close, his eyes were exactly the same and completely different. There was a steadiness there now that had taken years to learn. "You look like you." Emma laughed, relief loosening her shoulders. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me today." "Welcome back," he said. "How long are you here?" "I don't know," she said, and it was the truth in more ways than one. "Through Christmas, maybe." "Good," he said softly. "I mean, good that you'll see the tree lighting. They finally upgraded the star." "I heard," she said. "Apparently it used to flirt with blackouts." Jake grinned. "Daisy's line. She's been workshopping it for 3 days." They both laughed, and for a second it was easy, and for a second it was 7 years ago. And for a second Emma wondered if the universe had a sense of humor after all. "Coffee sometime?" he asked, gentle, like he was offering a hand but not pulling. "Yeah," she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "Daisies?" "Always daisies." "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow," he said. 9? 9 is good." They stood there in the cold, two people who used to know everything about each other and now knew almost nothing. He shoved his hands deeper into his pockets. She tucked her chin into her scarf. The wind carried a faint sound of children singing off-key from somewhere, and it didn't feel like bad singing. It felt like honest singing. "Okay," he said. "See you tomorrow, Em." "See you tomorrow," she said. The nickname slid over her like a blanket she forgot she still had. He walked back across the square, shoulders squared, head down against the wind. She watched him go until watching turned into staring and staring turned into feeling silly. She took a sip of cocoa. It was almost cold now, but she didn't mind. Emma reached into her pocket and touched the envelope like it was a talisman. Open on a day, you need a reason to go home. She was home. For the first time in a long time, the sentence didn't make her chest hurt. It made it feel possible. Snow started up again, light and soft, barely there. The kind of snow that you only notice when it rests on your sleeve. She tilted her head back and let a few flakes land on her cheeks. "Okay," she said to the tree, to the square, to herself. "Okay." And for the first time in 7 Decembers, Christmas didn't feel like something she had to survive. It felt like a door that had finally opened. Emma woke to the sound of a plough scraping the street and the faintest smell of cinnamon drifting through the vent. For a moment, she forgot where she was and reached for the snooze on her phone like she always did in the city. Then she saw the floral wallpaper, the crocheted throw at the foot of the bed, and the framed cross-stitch that said, "Bless this mess," above the dresser, and it all slid back into place. The Maple House Inn wasn't fancy, but it had soft towels, a little radiator that clicked like an old typewriter, and a window that looked out over Main Street. Down below, Pinebridge was stretching awake, a guy in a red beanie unlocking the hardware store, Mrs. Line propping the post office door with a rubber wedge, a kid dragging a sled over bare sidewalk because optimism is a muscle. Emma pulled on the red sweater from last night. It still smelled faintly like cardboard from the box, and, weirdly, like her mum's kitchen. She stood at the window for a while, long enough to watch a string of lights blink themselves back on one by one in the display across the street. There was a small thrill in the simple choreographed normalcy of it, like the town had a pulse you could set your watch to. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Nora, tree lighting is Friday at 7. Come over first for gingerbread. The kids will climb you like a jungle gym. It'll be great. Liv, City. Send pics of small-town holiday magic or I'm calling the Hallmark Channel for a wellness check. Boss. Don't forget, 23rd review. Need your eyes if you're around a laptop. Emma stared at the boss's message until it turned into just grey blocks on a screen and then dropped the phone face down. Not now. Not here. She tucked the letter into the inside pocket of her coat. She didn't trust any drawer in the world with it, and headed downstairs. Mrs. Adler, the innkeeper, wore a navy cardigan with candy canes embroidered along the hem and poured coffee like she'd been appointed to the post by a council of grandmothers. "Sleep okay, honey?" she asked, sliding a mug across the counter. "Like a rock," Emma said. "A rock with jet lag." Mrs. Adler nodded as if that made perfect sense. "We've got cinnamon rolls and egg casserole, and grapefruit halves because I keep pretending we're that kind of place." A cinnamon roll sounds perfect. "Good girl," she said, and then added, as if the conversation had already been going on without Emma. "You came in late last night, so I didn't get a good look. Emma, right?" Emma blinked. "Yes?" "You look like your mother around the eyes. Carla came through that door in that same red sweater once, the winter we had the ice storm." She set the plate down with a soft clink. "She told me you were the bravest person she knew. You must have been, 14. Emma's throat tightened. That sounds like her, and also like a thing she would exaggerate. "Love is a generous editor," Mrs. Adler said, smiling. "You staying through Christmas?" "Yeah," Emma said, "I think so." "Good," Mrs. Adler said, as if permission had just been granted. "Town likes a homecoming." After breakfast, Emma bundled up and stepped into the kind of cold that wakes up your bones. The sky was a pale winter blue, the kind that makes the breath from people's mouths look like speech bubbles. She shoved her hands into her pockets and let her feet choose a direction. The bookstore was first. Of course it was. Vincent Fable had a crooked floorboard 3 steps in and a cat who chose victims based on an algorithm no one understood. The bell over the door chimed, and Mr. Finch looked up from a stack of new paperbacks, glasses perched near the end of his nose. "Well, if it isn't a Christmas ghost," he said, eyes crinkling, "back to haunt our shelves." "I'll try to only rearrange the poetry section a little," Emma said. "You always put the sad ones at eye level," he accused. "Sales tactic," she said, "or empathy." Your mother did the same, had to keep moving Neruda because she said he was making people cry on their lunch breaks." He gestured to a display. "We've got a table of cozy mysteries and a table of books where nothing bad happens, if you're trying to save Christmas from melancholy. Throw one of each at me," she said. "I'm training for a marathon of feeling my feelings carefully." She picked up a slim novel about a cafe where time stopped at midnight, and a thick one about a family who fixed old houses and had elaborate brunches every Sunday. The cat condescended to rub against her shin, and then, satisfied with its charity work, stalked off to glare at a poinsettia. At the counter, Mr. Finch wrapped the books in brown paper and tied them with a piece of twine that looked recovered from someone's attic. "Tree lighting Friday," he said, which was apparently how Pinebridge said, "Don't disappear before I see you again." "I hear they upgraded the star," she offered, enjoying the way his mouth twitched. "They did," he said, "and they're very proud. It's brighter than my second marriage." Back on the sidewalk, music floated from somewhere. "Have yourself a merry little Christmas," the version that always felt like a hand on your shoulder. She passed the florist and watched a guy in a denim jacket, sleeves rolled, forearms somehow not cold, wire together a wreath with red berries and cedar. He noticed her looking and held it up like a fish he'd caught. "Want one for the inn?" he called. "She'll say she has enough and then put it on the back door," Emma called back. "Smart," he said, grinning. "Name's Eli." "Emma." "Welcome home, Emma," he said, and returned to his cedar like the scene had been rehearsed. By the time she reached the square, the sun had shifted to a brighter winter light that made everything look like a postcard. Kids were practicing for the Friday carols, which meant mostly shouting the parts they liked and mumbling the ones that had too many words. Someone was setting up a cocoa stand that promised real whipped cream in capital letters, like it was a moral stance. The tree loomed happily, draped in day-sleeping lights. Emma sat on a bench and watched Pinebridge run its little holiday engine. A couple argued softly about whether to put up outdoor lights this year or wait until they had a better ladder. A teenage girl in an oversized puffer practiced a dance routine in the reflection of the bakery window when she thought no one was watching. A dog in a sweater that said "nice" until December 26th pulled its owner toward a fallen donut like it had discovered a new planet. She'd left this because leaving had felt necessary at the time. There'd been a job in the city that wanted her now, and she'd wanted to prove she could want something that didn't have Jake in it. There'd been a fight, too. Of course there had. Two people who weren't good at saying "I'm scared" had said everything else instead. Add a mother getting sick, a girl trying to be two places at once, a boy trying to be a man faster than he knew how, and you have a recipe for silence. Her phone buzzed again. "Nora, can you do 5 p.m. today? Kids need to show someone their gingerbread masterpiece that leans like the Tower of Pisa. Emma, wouldn't miss it." "Nora, also, yes, I saw your almost wave in the square yesterday. Proud of you for not fainting." Emma, "Growth is real." Nora, "He's different now, in a good way, just saying." Emma locked the phone and let that last line sit beside her like a stranger on a bench. He's different now. She was different too, and not just because she had learned how to fix a leaky sink by watching 3 YouTube videos and swearing softly. She had learned what she wanted her days to feel like. She had learned that loneliness and independence are cousins who look alike in certain lighting. A wind picked up, sharp enough to slice through her coat. She stood, stamped her feet and pointed herself toward Daisy's, because of course she did. The bell dinged. The warmth felt like a promise. "You again," Daisy said, like she'd expected this exact entrance at this exact time. "Sit. I made something dangerous." "Define dangerous," Emma said, sliding into her booth. "Eggnog latte with a shot of I refuse to argue about nutmeg." Emma laughed. "Sold." Daisy steamed milk like it was a performance art and then leaned on the counter. "You seeing Nora later? 5 o'clock showtime for the Gingerbread Tower. Good. Those kids need an audience like Broadway needs tourists." She glanced out the window. "And how's your blood pressure now that you've seen a certain person from the ladder department?" Emma blushed, which apparently her face remembered how to do just fine. "Functioning. Mostly." "He's steady," Daisy said, like she was describing the weather again. "He took over more at the garage after his dad's knee surgery. Helps folks shovel after big storms without being asked. Doesn't make a fuss." Emma sipped the latte. Sweet, warm, unfairly perfect. "He asked me to get coffee. And?" "I said yes." Daisy beamed. "I would like to pretend to be surprised." They let a small silence be easy between them. A woman in a green coat came in and ordered 2 hot chocolates with extra marshmallows, and a third with no fun for her husband, who likes to suffer. A man in a puffy vest asked for a half-calf like he was confessing a sin. Someone in the corner argued with their laptop. Life, basically. Daisy slid a plate across the counter. "Try this." "What is it?" "A sugar cookie that wants to be a chandelier," she said, indicating the icing filigree. Emma broke off a piece and let it melt. "It's ridiculous." "Thank you." On her way out, Emma paused with her hand on the door. "Daisy? Did my mom ever talk about leaving before?" Daisy's eyes softened, and she came around the counter again, wiping her hands on her apron like courage. "Your mother loved this town with her whole chest," she said. "But loving something doesn't mean you don't want to see what else is out there. She was proud you did, even when it made the house too quiet." Emma swallowed the stone in her throat. "Thanks." "Go see Nora's chaos," Daisy said. "Come back tomorrow at 9. We'll pretend it's for the croissants." At Nora's, chaos had a name, and the name was Max. He was 4, had frosting on his ear, and greeted Emma at the door with, "Do you like houses that are sticky?" Behind him, Lucy, age 6.5, the half was contractual, announced, "I made a snowflake and it looks like a spider web and it's art." The gingerbread house was, as advertised, listing to the right like it had a secret. Gumdrops had been used in ways that challenged both architecture and theology. There was a pretzel fence. There was a marshmallow snowman with one eye. "It's perfect," Emma said, and meant it. "Your snow looks deliciously unsafe." Max thrust a gumdrop into her hand. "For you." "Bold gift-giving," Emma said. "I accept." Nora poured hot chocolate into mugs and then waved off Emma's attempt to help clean up. "Tell me everything not boring," she said. "Fast before the sugar crash." There's not much," Emma said, sitting at the table and letting her spine remember what chairs with backs felt like. "I checked into Maple House. I cried in front of Mrs. Adler's grapefruit. I bought 2 books I'm probably going to pretend made me a better person. I saw Jake. And he asked me to coffee. And I said yes." Nora squealed into her hands like a teenager and then immediately remembered she was a mother and checked to make sure no one jumped off a chair. "Okay, what's the plan? To drink coffee?" Emma smiled at the table. "I don't know. I'm not trying to rewrite history in an hour. I just want to see if we can talk without wanting to run away or kiss or apologize for everything at once." Nora considered this, nodding. "That's fair. He's more quiet now. Not in a sad way. In a chooses his words way. He had a bad year when his dad hurt his knee and the shop was a mess. Came out the other side steadier." Emma tried that word on for size. Steadier. "I could use a little steadier," she said. "We all could," Nora said, and then added, because mothers always add, "Max, no. That goes on the house, not in your nose." By the time Emma walked back to the inn, dusk had dipped the town in blue. Lights clicked on in windows, making each one look like a little stage where someone's life was happening. She stood on the corner for a minute, letting her eyes travel over it like a map she hadn't seen in a while. Back upstairs, she showered the day off and stood in the steam until her skin felt like it fit again. She took the letter from her coat pocket and set it on the nightstand. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. It was enough that it was there, breathing quietly beside the lamp. She sat on the bed with a notebook, paper, not an app, and wrote a list titled "Things I'm Allowed to Want," cocoa that tastes like chocolate, conversations that don't make me perform, a town where the grocery cashier knows if I'm buying flour because I'm baking or because I'm stress baking, to not be brave all the time, to see what happens if I stop trying to leave first. She added 6, coffee at 9, and circled it twice. Morning came with a crispness that made the window look like it had been cleaned by angels with tiny squeegees. Emma dressed like someone who wasn't trying too hard. Jeans, sweater, the coat that made her feel like she was being hugged by a blanket. She braided her hair loosely and immediately unbraided it because some habits need rehearsal. She put on lip balm that smelled like peppermint and told herself she was a person who could drink coffee with someone from her past without turning into a puddle. On her way down the stairs, she passed a little Christmas village set up on a side table. Tiny ceramic houses, street lamps, a skating pond with skaters frozen mid-glide. Someone had added a miniature coffee shop with a sign that said Daisies. Whoever had done it had also tucked a little paper heart in the window. Emma stood there too long staring at it, and then felt silly, like she'd been caught eavesdropping on joy. The air bit at her cheeks the second she stepped outside. The walk to Daisy's was short. Pinebridge was built for walking and for being seen walking, but it felt longer because time stretches and contracts around certain mornings. She reached for the door at the same moment it swung in from the other side. The bell did its cheerful little ding, and Jake was there, holding it for her like the most ordinary thing in the world. "Hey," he said, the word warm enough to fog glass. "Hey," she echoed, stepping inside. Daisy looked up, assessed the situation in a quarter of a second, and decided to become invisible except for the part where she made coffee. "Morning," she sang. "Sit wherever your fate directs you." They took the booth by the window because pretending there was any other booth was a joke. For a heartbeat, the silence felt like a test. Then it softened. Jake unbuttoned his coat and ran a hand through his hair like it had been waiting for that exact hand. "How's Maple House?" he asked. "Cozy," she said. "I think the comforter remembers the Reagan administration." He smiled. "Some things don't need updating." "Tell that to the Star," she said. He laughed. "Yeah, well, the Star had lost our trust." Daisy delivered 2 coffees and made a show of not listening. Jake took a sip and winced. "Too hot. I never learn." "You were always impatient," Emma said, and then immediately panicked that it sounded like an accusation. "No, yeah," he said, a corner of his mouth quirking. "I still am sometimes, but less reckless, I guess." "That's not a bad word," she said. "It was when I was 20, he said. Now it just means I buy salt before the storm instead of during." They both laughed, and something unclenched inside her. He asked about the city. She told him small stories, the kind you tell when you're proving you've been living a life. The neighbor who waters plastic plants, the bodega cat who sits on the lottery machine, the way the subway sometimes feels like a confession booth. He told her about the garage, about Mr. Daly's truck that's held together by hope and duct tape, about teaching himself to like podcasts, about how people always come in right before closing on snow days because panic is a lifestyle. "Your mom," he said after a beat. I wanted to tell you how sorry I was. I didn't know if I should call, and then too much time passed and I didn't know what the rules were anymore." "She would have told you to call anyway," Emma said gently. "She wasn't big on rules." He nodded, studying his hands. "I miss her a lot." "Me too," Emma said. And there it was, the thing you can only say with someone who knew the same person the same way. The room got very quiet and not at all awkward, just honest. He looked up. "I never stopped thinking about you," he said, and then immediately shook his head. "Sorry, that's a lot. We can talk about weather and cocoa, I swear." "No," she said. "It's okay. The letter was a lot too." His eyes widened. "You found it. In a box in my apartment, her handwriting on the envelope, yours inside." He exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath for a year. "She told me she was going to build a bridge," she said. "She did," Emma said. "It worked." "Does the bridge go all the way across?" he asked softly. "Maybe not yet," she said. "But I'm on it. I'm walking." They both sat with that for a second. Outside, a kid pressed her face to the glass and made a fish mouth that fogged up a perfect circle. Emma smiled. Jake saw and waved, and the kid squealed like she'd been granted a wish. "Walk with me?" he asked. "After this?" "Yeah," she said, surprising herself again at how easy it was to say yes. They finished their coffees slower than necessary, like they'd made a truce with time. When they stood, Daisy pretended to need to adjust the pastry case right then, but managed to whisper to Emma, "Your hair looks good down," because Daisy was constitutionally incapable of not directing the film of other people's lives. Outside, the air had that bright cold that makes everything look sharper. They fell into step like a muscle memory they both still had. He pointed out the new mural on the side of the library, cardinals in a winter tree, and she told him Mr. Finch had accused her of weaponizing sad poetry. They passed the skating pond, where two teenagers were pretending not to hold hands, and an elderly man in a cap made 3 perfect figure 8s, like he'd been saving them for a special day. By the time they looped back toward the square, the tree seemed taller, as if it had eavesdropped and decided to stand up straighter for them. Jake stopped, shoved his hands in his pockets, and looked at her with that steady thing in his eyes again. "Tomorrow," he said, "I have to hang lights on 3 porches, fix a snowblower, and pretend to like a cookie from Mrs. Hart that tastes like drywall. But I could meet you after? We could keep walking." Emma nodded. "I'd like that." He grinned, small and real. "Okay, then." They stood there, 2 people who had chosen coffee and walking and tomorrow, and the bells from the church on Elm began to chime the half-hour. It sounded less like a clock and more like a promise. "See you," he said. "See you," she said. He turned to go, and she watched him take 3 steps before she let herself breathe out a laugh she hadn't known she'd been holding. Back at the inn, Mrs. Adler was putting tiny scarves on the ceramic villagers. She looked up, clocked Emma's face, and said, "Well, good morning to you, Miss Sunshine." Emma touched her cheeks. "Too obvious?" "Darling, if you were any more obvious, I'd put a bow on you and stick you under the tree." Emma took the stairs 2 at a time, and when she closed the door to her room, she leaned against it, smiling at nothing particular. She reached for the letter, opened it, and read the last line again. "If you ever come back, I'll be at the coffee shop on Main Street, the old place, you know the one. J." She folded it carefully, held it to her chest for a breath, and then set it down beside her notebook. She added 1 more line to her list. The courage to believe in simple things. Outside, Pinebridge kept moving, buses and bells and the rustle of a town practicing for Friday night. Inside, the radiator clicked faithfully, and Emma felt, for the first time in years, like the day in front of her belonged to her. Emma woke up the next morning with that strange, impossible thing, hope, sitting at the edge of her bed like a patient dog. She tried to shoo it away with logic. This is just coffee. This is just walking. This is just a town that knows your name and a boy who used to know your heartbeat. Hope yawned, stretched, and stayed. She dressed for practical cold. Jeans, boots, a sweater that had survived college, a coat that believed in her. She braided her hair, and then didn't. She looked at herself in the mirror and practiced a smile that said, "I'm fine, really," then caught the tired joke in her own eyes and laughed. Fine was a small word. Today she wanted a bigger one. Not perfect, not forever, just possible. Downstairs, Mrs. Adler slid a plate toward her before she'd finished saying good morning. "Try the cranberry-orange scone," she said. "It's festive without being rude." Emma bit into sunshine, disguised as pastry. "You're dangerous." "I hear that a lot," Mrs. Adler said, entirely unrepentant. Then, like the weather, "The square looks pretty today. Good day for walking." Outside, Pinebridge had turned itself up a notch. Ribbons on lampposts curled in the wind like they had hair appointments. The skating pond held 2 early birds who moved with careful bravery, hands out for balance, laughter fogging the air behind them. The tree in the square waited, lights asleep, a giant, patient friend. Emma took the long way to Daisy's and still arrived 10 minutes early. She stood across the street pretending to read a poster about the holiday pet parade. Costumes encouraged. Reindeer antlers provided, and told herself she was simply a person who liked to be on time. The door opened. The bell dinged. Jake stepped out, holding 2 cups, head tipped to keep the heat in. He saw her and lifted 1 cup in a toast across the tiny distance of the world. "Back up cocoa," he said. "Insurance, in case the coffee fails us." "I like a man with contingency plans," Emma said, crossing. "Is that new?" "Trying it out," he said, handing her the cup. "Goes with buying salt before the storm." They didn't sit. They started walking like they'd agreed to a thing in another life and were picking it up mid-sentence in this one. The cold had the good kind of bite. Their breath made little clouds that drifted and disappeared. "How's your dad?" she asked. "Being told to rest has given him a new hobby," Jake said. "Complaining about not resting. That's a full-time job. He's committed." Jake's mouth hit that almost smile it had discovered yesterday. "He watches the shop like a retired general. Tells me I'm putting the alternators on the wrong shelf, even when there's only one shelf." "Men love a shelf opinion," Emma said. "It's science." "And law," he said, solemn. They both laughed too easily and didn't apologize for it. They walked past Finch and Fable. The cat was in the window, pretending none of this affected him. Mr. Finch raised a hand in a way that implied he had approved of both of them not messing this up yet. They crossed toward the school, where construction paper snowflakes hung at wild angles in the kindergarten windows. "You still leave town as soon as you can?" Jake asked, not unkindly. Emma let the question rest in the air long enough to cool. "I used to," she said, "like I'd miss the last boat if I stayed another minute. But I got tired of proving I could leave. Turns out it's easy. Staying is the tricky part," he nodded. "I used to pretend I never wanted to leave, like being happy here was a job I had to show up for with a smile. Then my dad got hurt, and I realized it wasn't pretending." "Happiness as a job," Emma said. "Do you get dental?" "Just cocoa," he said, "and Daisy's strong opinions." They cut through the park. Someone had strung lights along the fence. In the thin daylight, they looked like secrets waiting for dark. A kid on a sled slid down a hill with alarming confidence, his father jogging beside him with the exact amount of fear that keeps the world spinning. The sled hit a bump, flew an inch, landed, kept going. The boy's laugh cracked open the sky for one clear second. Emma felt that laugh somewhere behind her ribs. "Do you ever get mad at how sweet this place is?" she asked. "Like it's mocking you for ever wanting anything else?" "Sometimes," Jake said. "Then I remember it's a town, not a person. It's not testing me, it's offering, it's like..." He looked for the words. "Like hot soup on a table. You can say yes, you can say no. The soup doesn't take it personally." "Soup should take more things personally," she said. "It would be a better world." They ended up at the garage because maybe walking is just a way of telling the truth with your feet. Jake held the door, and the bell above it gave a tired clunk, like it had been rung one too many times by boys who were now men. The smell was ghostly familiar: oil, rubber, coffee that had learned about despair on a hot plate. "Morning," a voice called from the back. Mr. Hargrove shuffled in, wiping his hands on a rag that might once have been a shirt. His knee brace peeked out from under his coveralls like a secret, trying to be polite. He saw Emma and stopped, and then smiled like he'd just remembered the punchline to a joke from 1999. "Well, look at that, if it isn't trouble with good hair." "Hi, Mr. H," Emma said, and let herself be hugged in a puff of shop air. "You back to steal my son's time and all my patience?" he said, fond as a sunrise. "I'm thinking of subcontracting," she said. He cackled, then winced, hand grazing his knee. "Don't mind me. This thing whines more than I do." He patted Jake's shoulder. "He's been running the place like a man with a list." Jake blushed in a way that would have embarrassed him at 20, and looked good on him now. "We had a truck last week that squeaked every time it turned right," he said. "I fixed it, and the guy said he misses the squeak. Says it kept him company." "Solution. We put a bell in there," Mr. Hargrove said. "Charged twice." Emma laughed. "Ethics by Hargrove." They didn't stay long. There are places you can only visit for a few minutes, or you end up remembering more than you came for. Back on the street, Emma looked at Jake's hands. She'd always liked his hands. They held things like the world wasn't fragile, but should still be treated like it was. Do you remember senior year? She asked. When we built that snowman behind the library because we were improving campus culture. We gave him a scarf so loud he got noise complaints, Jake said, and a nose that was actually a cinnamon stick. Because the cafeteria had a spice display and we respected our tools, Emma said, mock solemn. They grinned at each other, teen ghosts overlaying 20-something faces for a heartbeat. Then the ghosts stepped back and let them breathe. They drifted toward the river trail, where the world got quieter in that city people can't believe silence. Snow cushioned their steps. Trees made that soft winter shh sound, as if everything natural on earth was gently asking them to take it down a notch. The river slid black and smooth under a skin of new ice. Jake kicked at a drift. Do you ever think about that summer? He asked. Emma didn't have to ask which. Sometimes, she said, when I smell cut grass or hear someone tuning a guitar. The night of the county fair, he said. You wore that blue dress and your shoes broke, and we walked home barefoot. And you carried them, she said, like a knight carrying his lady's palest flats. Honor is honor, he said. The memory landed between them like a soft animal and curled up to nap. I'm sorry, Emma said then, surprising herself, for how I left. It was messy. I was messy. I didn't make it easier, Jake said. I wanted to be the guy who said go, but I was really the guy who was afraid you wouldn't come back. I wanted you to be brave for me, she said, so I didn't have to be brave alone. I wanted you to choose me, he said. They looked at each other like people who had just found the clean sentence under a pile of complicated ones. A cardinal jumped from branch to branch above them, a red flash against white. Somewhere a dog barked once, like a polite reminder that the world existed. I don't want to rewrite it, Emma said. I don't want to pretend we were better than we were. Me neither, Jake said. I just want a fair shot at who we are now. She nodded, relief and fear bumping shoulders inside her. Who are you now? He considered. A guy who buys salt early and uses a coaster sometimes, he said. A guy who measures twice and cuts once. A guy who knows how to ask for help more than never. Big growth on the coaster, she said. You? He asked. A woman who knows when she's performing, she said. Who sleeps mostly. Who says I need out loud, sometimes even to other humans. I like her, he said. I'm still getting used to her, she said. They reached the small footbridge where high school couples had carved initials for decades. The rail had a fresh swirl of M+A with a little lopsided heart. Emma touched the carving with a mittened finger and remembered being 16 and certain. It was almost enviable. Certainty. Almost. A gust of wind made both of them tuck their chins. Jake looked at her hair the way you look at a familiar road in new snow. You want to come by the shop later? He asked. We're closing early to help set up the choir risers. Or there's the winter market on Maple. Eli, the wreath guy, threatened me with cider. Threatened you with cider. He said if I didn't show up, he would bring it to me. Hot, with extra cinnamon. He sounds like a menace. He is, Jake said, fond, but he believes in holidays like it's his job. They ended up at the market because the smell of roasted chestnuts can move a person through time. Stalls lined the street. Handmade mittens, candles that all claimed to smell like winter in slightly different fonts. An old woman selling jars of jam with labels like Berry Hopeful and Figure It Out. A fiddler played something cheerful that made toddlers bounce and teenagers pretend not to. Eli, sleeves rolled in defiance of the season, spotted them and lifted a ladle like a sword. See, he called to Emma, menace. You were right, she said. He handed them each a paper cup. Hot cider, on the house, because love is in the air. Is it? Jake said. I can smell it, Eli said. Smells like cinnamon and people trying to be brave. They wandered the market warm from the inside out. Emma bought a jar of jam because of course she did. Jake picked up a wooden ornament carved into a simple heart and turned it over in his palm, thumb tracing the grain, like reading a story in a language you only speak when you're not thinking about it. "You should get it," Emma said. "For the shop." "For the tree," she said, then flushed. "I mean, the town tree, or your dad's." "Right," he said softly, and set it back, like setting down a bird you're not sure you're allowed to keep. A woman from church stopped them to ask Emma if she remembered being a sheep in the Nativity one year. "You were the most committed sheep I've ever seen," she said, delighted. "You took a nap in the manger." "I was an early method actor," Emma said. Jake tried and failed not to laugh. They found a quiet edge near the end of the stalls where a boy practiced scales on a trumpet, like he was trying to bargain with the universe. Emma looked at Jake, and the look asked a question she hadn't planned yet. "What are you afraid of?" she asked, like a dare she'd decided to take herself. He didn't reach for a joke. "That we'll be great this week, and then you'll go," he said, "and the part of me that remembered how to hope will forget again." She nodded, like this was a true thing she could put in her pocket and not drop. "I'm afraid I'll stay because it's Christmas," she said, "and mistake warm lights for a plan." "Lights go out," he said. "Plans change," she said. They stood with the honesty of it carefully, like balancing something on open hands. Her phone buzzed. She didn't want to look. She looked anyway. "Boss, quick update needed. Can you jump on a call?" 20 minutes max. The city had snuck its hand under the door. Jake saw the way her face shifted and stepped back half an inch to give the moment space. "You can take it," he said. "I should help Eli not burn the cider anyway." "Sorry," she said, hating the word immediately. "Don't be," he said, and meant it. "This is your life. You don't need permission to live it." She breathed, grateful and annoyed at herself, and relieved he understood. "Can we—" "Tomorrow," he said. "I'm helping at the choir practice. Come by? You can laugh at my inability to clap on 2 and 4. "I would never," she said. "You absolutely would," he said, grinning. "That's one of the things I like about you." She stepped away to take the call. The library steps were cold under her, the phone warm against her ear. She spoke the language of her other life for 11 minutes. Timelines, deliverables, "Can we ship this before Christmas? I'll send notes." She said of course 3 times and no problem once when there was a problem. When she hung up, the air felt colder and the town felt like it had waited politely. Jake was talking to Eli when she came back, the two of them in animated debate about wreath symmetry. He looked up and saw her, and something in his face did that gentle steadying again, like he was a dock, and she was a boat that had been in chop. He didn't reach for her. He didn't perform. He just made room. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Work," she said. "Nothing catastrophic, just loud." "Loud is a good word," he said. "It's my favorite bad one." They didn't try to fix anything. They didn't start planning a future like people who had forgotten how badly plans can make fools of us. They just stood there drinking the last sweet sips of cider, the market thinning around them as the afternoon leaned into evening. "Walk you back?" he asked. "Please." They took the long way on purpose, past the school again, where construction paper snowflakes had dropped one by one like shy dancers. Past Finch and Fable, closed for lunch, a small sign in the window promising, "Be back when the spell breaks." Past Daisy's, where the windows fogged at the corners, and someone inside laughed the kind of laugh you only laugh when you're warm and not alone. At the corner by the inn, they slowed in that awkward choreography of people deciding whether to hug. They didn't. They stood close enough for their coats to argue about touching. "Tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow," she echoed. The word felt like a small, brave contract. A wind came around the corner fast, carrying the smell of chimney smoke and something cinnamon trying to be subtle. She reached a hand up, she didn't even realize she was doing it, and brushed a snowflake out of his hair. The world narrowed to the softest possible point. He didn't lean in. She didn't either. But something in their faces acknowledged the almost, a quaze that wrote itself on both their mouths and then politely stepped back, like a gentleman leaving a door open. "Good night, Em," he said, voice thinner from the cold but warm enough to last. "Good night," she said. He walked away, not looking back, and it didn't feel like leaving. It felt like giving the moment a chance to breathe. Inside, Mrs. Adler was putting tiny battery tea lights into the little ceramic houses. "You're glowing," she said, not looking up. "It's the weather," Emma said. "Mm-hmm," Mrs. Adler said, like the choir humming an amen. Up in her room, Emma sat on the bed and let the quiet arrive before she reached for the letter. She didn't read it. She placed it on the pillow beside her like a book you're not ready to open because you like the feeling of wanting to. She wrote another list. Things I don't have to decide today. Where I live in January. Whether I can do my job from a kitchen table that smells like cinnamon. If forever is a word I can say without whispering. Whether a person can belong to two places without splitting in half. If almost counts. She put the pen down. The radiator clicked, faithful as a heartbeat. Snow ticked at the window like a shy guest asking to be let in. Her phone lit up with a new message. "Nora, proud of you, proud of both of you. Don't rush, let it be good and slow." Emma, trying. "Nora, tomorrow's choir practice is at 6. I'm in the alto section pretending I can count. Come laugh at me." Emma smiled. She turned off the lamp and lay in the winter dark, which in Pinebridge wasn't very dark at all because the town refused to let night be lonely. She closed her eyes and saw Jake's face at the market, steady and open, and the way he'd made space without making a speech. She drifted like a snowflake chooses where to land, not aimlessly, not certain, just trusting the air. Down the hall someone started a record. Crackly piano and the hush of an old Christmas song that had learned to be quiet so you could hear your own life. Emma slept, and outside the town kept its small promises. The town looked different at night, like someone had turned down the world and turned up the lights. Strings of warm bulbs traced roof lines, wreaths glowed on doors as if they had their own tiny hearths. The air held that soft winter hush that makes people talk quieter without knowing why. Emma tugged her scarf higher as she crossed the square toward the church hall. Through the frosted windows she could see shapes moving, coats coming off, people finding places on the risers, the conductor tapping a music stand. The door stuck for a second, then gave with a small groan, and a wave of sound washed over her, chairs scraping, laughter, a piano testing chords, a baby squealing because somewhere a jingle bell had betrayed itself. "Over here!" Nora called, already waving a folder of music like a flag. Her headband had a felt holly leaf on one side that kept listing left, a ship in gentle trouble. "I saved you a seat for the mock audience. Your job is to cry at the right parts." "I'm excellent at crying," Emma said, shedding her coat and gloves. "What are the right parts?" "Any time we hit the high note," Nora said, "or when Mr. Grace forgets the words and sings Watermelon until he remembers." Emma sat on the front pew. The wood had that polished, lived-in gloss that comes from decades of winter coats and restless children. She glanced along the risers and found him easily. Jake stood toward the back with the tenors, folder open, posture loose, but paying attention. He looked over as if he'd felt where her eyes landed and smiled, small, private, as if there were a string running between them that hummed when either of them pulled. The conductor, Mrs. Patel, clapped twice. "Okay, angels and aspiring angels from the top. Remember, find the note, then find the joy. Piano, a breath that belonged to 30 people at once. And then music. It wasn't perfect. That would have been a shame. It was warm and earnest, the kind of sound that makes you think about sugar cookies and forgiveness. A few voices wobbled on the descant, but the wobble sounded like effort which is its own kind of beauty. On the second verse, an alto came in too strong, realized it, and covered her mouth with the back of her hand, like she'd said a bad word in church. Everyone kept going. That was the other beauty. Music forgiving itself in real time. Jake sang with the practical focus of a person who'd taught himself to like being part of something. His voice wasn't loud, but it knew its lane and stayed there, sometimes glancing over at Emma as if to check that she was still in the room, still breathing. On a break, people milled for cocoa in styrofoam cups and cookies on plates that had belonged to the church since the 70s. "You came," Jake said softly, stopping close enough that his coat brushed her sleeve. "I did," she said. "I'm emotionally prepared to be moved by Silent Night." He chuckled. "Good, because Mr. Grace has been practicing the bass line like it owes him money." They stood near the tree in the corner, the one with photos clipped to ribbons. Old pageants, bake sales, faces of people who looked like they'd always been there. Emma recognized her own fourth-grade self in a star costume, arms out like a capital Y. "You were committed," Jake said, following her gaze. "I peaked young," she said. "That star knew things." He handed her a cookie with green sprinkles. "I can probably get you the role again. The current star keeps complaining about chafing." "Tempting," she said. "Do I get dental?" "Soup and opinions," he said. And she laughed in that quiet way, where the laugh hides under your breath and warms the space behind your ribs. Rehearsal resumed. The room dimmed a little as someone flicked off the fluorescents and left only the strings of lights around the windows and the lamps in the corners. The music landed differently in low light, softer, somehow closer to skin. On "O Come All Ye Faithful," Mrs. Patel asked for volunteers to step forward on the last chorus, to sing it like you've been waiting for something and it finally arrived. Jake stepped down with 4 others, and when the chord swelled, Emma felt her throat tighten, not because it was polished, but because it was true. After coats went back on, instruments in cases, chairs back on racks. People lingered in the way small towns have perfected, conversations refusing to say goodbye all at once. Jake caught Emma's eye and tipped his head toward the side door. The night met them with a silvered quiet. Above, the sky was a deep bowl with pinholes punched through it. "You okay?" he asked. "Good kind of ruined," she said. "They sang like they meant it." "They do," he said. "They've practiced hoping." They walked without agenda. Their steps found a pace that was less about distance and more about listening. The square had emptied to a handful of shapes, 2 teenagers sharing a scarf, an older couple arm in arm, a dog insisting a fire hydrant contained mysteries. "Want to see something?" Jake asked, almost shy. "Always dangerous," she said. "Yes." He led her down Maple to a narrow alley between the bakery and the old tailor's shop, now a gallery that seemed mostly to display handmade mugs with titles like Warmth Vessel Number 12. The alley ended at a small courtyard with a bench and a lamppost, and a mural on the brick wall, snowy pines, a curve of river, a paper boat lit by stars. Someone had hung mason jars along the top edge with tiny lights inside. "This is new," she said, slipping her hands into her pockets to keep from touching everything. "Summer project," he said. "A bunch of us painted in shifts. Eli did the jars. He says someone should propose here, but he also says that about the produce aisle." Emma took in the mural slowly, the way you take in a story you want to remember detail by detail. The boat looked like it was moving and not moving at the same time. "It's tender," she said. "Good word," he said. They sat. The bench was cold, but not unfriendly. Across the street, the bakery's windows glowed with their own little sun, a baker moving like a quiet metronome behind the glass. "You ever think about what you wanted at 17? She asked. "And what you want now?" "All the time," he said, no hesitation. At 17, I wanted to get out and stay and kiss you and win the snow sculpture contest and never have to explain myself to anyone who wasn't you. And now? She asked. He looked at the mural like it might help organize his sentences. Now I want to be the person who shows up. For my dad. For the town when the plow breaks. For the kid whose bike chain won't behave. For the person I'm talking to in a courtyard that smells like cinnamon and paint. He glanced at her, then back to the wall. I don't need the story to be big. I need it to be honest. She exhaled, slow. I wanted everything to be big, she said. I wanted skylines and deadlines and a sense that I was keeping up with a race nobody invited me to, and I got a lot of good things. But sometimes I'd be on the subway and a stranger would laugh at a text and I'd feel this ache, like I wanted to be in a place where I knew who was laughing and why. He nodded. I know that ache, he said softly. Silence, but not the heavy kind. The kind that lets you hear small things. A string light buzzing faintly, a distant car tire slushing through snow, a bell somewhere counting to 9 and then deciding it had made its point. He shifted, turned toward her without closing the space. Can I ask you something not fair? Dangerous and not fair, she said. Good genre. Okay. If you could stay, he said, would you? She looked up at the slice of sky between the roofs. A plane's tiny blink crossed it, city to somewhere, someone asleep with their head against a window. If life was just a string of nights like this, she said, yes, I'd stay. But life also asks for Tuesday mornings and spreadsheets and making sure your health insurance is real. He smiled. I like Tuesday mornings, he said. They have low expectations, but I get it. She swallowed. And you? If you could leave? I could, he said. Any day. My dad would yell, then hug me. The town would find another person to carry the ladder, but leaving just to prove I can isn't a goal anymore. I want to be brave at staying. It's harder. For me, anyway. A breeze ran its fingers through the jars and made the lights tremble. Emma rubbed her hands together, more for something to do than because she was cold. He noticed and didn't offer his gloves. She loved him a little for not rescuing her from a thing she hadn't asked to be rescued from. Come on, he said lightly, standing, before I wax poetic and Eli senses it and appears with interpretive dance. They cut back toward the square. The skating pond had emptied but for 2 teenagers spinning slowly, faces close, learning the physics of trust. The big tree wore its lights like a cathedral wears stained glass. The bakery door jingled and sent a gust of sugar into the night. Somewhere, a radio played a Christmas song that had outlived 3 generations and still remembered the original tempo. Walk you to Maple House? He asked. Please, she said, and then for once didn't fill the space after please with a joke. On the corner, under a lamppost that threw a circle of warm light around their boots, they paused again in the choreography of almost. He looked at her mouth and then away. She looked at his collarbone, because looking at his eyes felt like stepping off a roof into trust. Thank you for the mural, she said, which wasn't what she meant. Thank you for coming to the choir, he said, which wasn't what he meant. Tomorrow, she asked. Tomorrow, he said. He started to lean in, stopped, reconsidered. She did the same. An instinct and a counter-instinct. A dance of 2 people who had learned, the hard way, that timing is not a metaphor. They both laughed, breath turning to fog between them, like the air was holding the almost safely for later. Good night, Em, he said. Good night, she said, and it wasn't a closing. It was a ribbon saving a place in a book. Inside, Mrs. Adler had left a plate on the hall table with a note. For Emma, ginger molasses cookies. The cure for everything I can legally claim to cure. She took one, bit into spice and sugar, and the kind of comfort that hums. In her room, she sat on the bed and pulled the letter from the nightstand. She didn't open it right away. She liked how it felt closed, a small square of promise. Her phone buzzed face down. She let it. The radiator clicked in a rhythm that could almost be a lullaby. The message preview finally lured her hand. Boss, quick heads up. Clients loved your deck. If you can be in the city the first week of January, we want to talk about a lead role for Q1. In-person preferred. Big raise attached. Happy to hop on a call tomorrow. Her stomach dropped and lifted at the same time. Elevator feelings. She read it again. Lead role. In-person. First week of January. The words looked shiny. They also looked like a doorway that led away from the alley with the jars and the choir in low light and the boy who had learned to be steady. She set the phone down like it was hot. She pressed her thumb into the edge of the envelope until it left a crescent on her skin. She wasn't going to decide tonight. She put the letter back on the nightstand, turned off the lamp, and let the room be lit by whatever light managed to sneak in from the street. Outside, a plough passed hiss and scrape like a slow exhale. Emma lay on her back and watched the soft glow travel across the ceiling when a car went by. She pictured Jake under his own lamplight, a book open, maybe his dad snoring in the other room, the house holding their quiet. She pictured herself at a desk in January, with the glass and the skyline, and the elevator ding and the espresso machine hissing like applause. She pictured both lives and didn't force them to fight yet. Her phone buzzed again, a gentler light. Jake. You left your scarf at the hall. It's safe with me. I can drop it by tomorrow or hold it hostage for Coco. She smiled into the dark. Emma. Hostage negotiations tomorrow. I bring cookies. A pause, then. Jake. Deal. Good night, Em. She set the phone on the mattress beside her hand, palm up like she was catching a snowfall. The town hummed its soft, ordinary song. The mural lights trembled a little in the wind. Somewhere a timer dinged in a kitchen where someone took out a pan of something sweet and called into the next room, "Careful, it's hot." Emma closed her eyes. The night held her gently, like something precious and breakable that it fully believed would not break. Morning came bright and clean, the sky the pale blue of new paper. Emma wrapped a tin of cookies in a dish towel and tucked her scarfless neck into her coat. She could have texted. She didn't want to text. She wanted to show up. The garage bell clunked when she pushed the door. The smell hit her first, oil, cold air, coffee, and then the sight of Jake under the hood of a Honda that looked like it had chosen chaos as a hobby. His hands were steady, his jaw set in concentration. He looked like a person who could keep things running. "Hey," she said, and her voice bounced off metal and landed soft. He straightened, wiped his hands on a rag, and smiled that precise smile that said, "You're a good thing in the middle of my morning." "Hey, you're officially underdressed," he added, eyeing her bare neck. "Also, you're in luck." He crossed to the counter, lifted her scarf like a flag saved from a battle, and held it out. "It behaved," he said. She reached for it, and their fingers brushed. Just a second, just enough to count as a moment. "Thank you," she said, looping it around her neck. "Hostage negotiations successful. I brought a bribe." She lifted the tin. He opened it and inhaled like a cartoon. "You're dangerous," he said. "Is this legal in 3 states?" "Only if eaten with restraint," she said. "So, no." He took one, broke it in half, handed her the bigger piece without comment. They ate in the way people eat when their hands are warmer than the room around them, crumbs falling onto a ledger that had seen years of names and numbers. "How's your morning?" she asked. "Alternator fight," he said. "I think I'm winning. Choir set up later. Eli says if I don't show up, he'll consider it a personal betrayal and write a wreath about it." She grinned. He would. They stood in that easy hush that had become a third person in the room. Emma felt the moment opening like a door. She could step through and keep it simple, or tell the truth and risk the air changing. She went with the truth. "I got an email last night," she said. "Work?" he asked, already knowing, because the rhythm of her sentences had changed. "Yeah, they want me back in the city the first week of January," she said, keeping her voice even. "Lead role, big raise, in person." There it was, the word in person dropping between them like a coin into a jar they'd both been pretending not to look at. He nodded slow, like a man reading the weather. "That's big," he said. "You worked hard for that." "I did," she said. "It's the kind of thing I used to pray for." He leaned against the counter, the rag in his hand twisted tight without him noticing. And now I don't know," she said. "I like it here. I like the quiet, and Daisy bossing me around, and Mrs. Adler's cookies, and the way people say, 'See you tomorrow,' and mean it. I like—" She stopped before the sentence broke itself. "I like how I feel when I'm with you." He stared at a spot on the ledger, like the numbers might give him a better line than the one he had. "So you'll say no?" he asked, too careful. She breathed. "I don't know," she said again, and hated how small it sounded. Silence rearranged itself. He nodded, like he was putting a tool back in the drawer. "Of course," he said. "You don't know." "Jake." "It's okay," he said quickly, as if speed could keep the room from getting sharper edges. "I mean, it makes sense. You're good at what you do. They want you back. That's what good news looks like." She took a small step toward him. "I'm telling you because it's not simple for me. It used to be. I would have said yes and been on a train by now, but I can't just do the old version of me." He nodded again, but the nod had turned into a shield. "You shouldn't," he said. "You shouldn't choose anybody else's idea of you, not even mine." "That's not what I'm doing," she said softly. "I'm asking if there's a way this doesn't have to be a choice between a zip code and a person." His mouth pressed into a thoughtful line. "I don't know how to be a part-time person," he said. "I used to try. It didn't look good on me." "That's not what I'm asking," she said. "I'm asking if we can try to figure out a way that doesn't break us." He ran a hand through his hair, paced 2 steps, stopped. "You want an answer today?" he asked, a little laugh in the question, not unkind, just tired. "Because the last time we did this conversation, we sprinted. We said things like they were umbrellas in a storm, and then wondered why we were still wet." "I don't want to sprint," she said. "I want to stand in the rain with you a minute and admit we're wet." He smiled without his eyes, and then, slowly, let the smile reach them. "That's a sentence only you would say." You know how to hear it," she said. The bell clunked again, and Mr. Hargrove shuffled out, spotted the cookies, and took one with a grunt that contained gratitude. "You two solving the world?" he asked. "Trying not to break it," Jake said. "Try not to break lunch while you're at it," Mr. Hargrove said, and disappeared back into the office. They both laughed, and the laughter made a little bridge. She put a hand on the counter, palm down, a quiet offer of presence. He put his hand near it, not touching, a quiet acceptance of the offer. Then she made the mistake that people make when they're trying to hold too many truths at once. She tried to make it sound easy. "I could commute," she said quickly. "It's only a few hours. I could do a few days there, a few days here. I could—" He flinched. Not big, not dramatic, just a flicker. And she felt it like a draft. "What?" she said gently. He shook his head. "Nothing. It's not fair to be allergic to solutions." "Say it," she said. He looked at her and didn't look away. "I don't want to be your layover," he said. Soft. True. The kind of line that doesn't slam a door. It just keeps it from swinging. It didn't land like an accusation. It landed like a confession. She breathed around it. "I don't either," she said. "I don't want to turn you into a train schedule." "Good," he said, a humorless laugh escaping. "Because I'm terrible at those." The Honda clicked as it cooled, a small mechanical applause for surviving another attempt at honesty. Outside, a plough passed slow, the scrape like a sigh. "I have to get to the hall," he said, glancing at the clock more to buy time than check it. "Risers don't build themselves." "Okay," she said, feeling the moment tip. I'll come by later." "Please do," he said, and meant it. Then, softer, "I'm happy you told me." She nodded, wished she were better at finishing sentences, and walked out into a morning that felt colder than it had 10 minutes ago. The day split in two for both of them. For Jake, there were risers and cables and chairs that didn't stack right. There were people asking where to put what, and 3 different opinions about whether the altos should stand in front of the baritones. There was Eli showing up with cider and an unsolicited pep talk. "Love is logistics. Don't be afraid of the boxes." Jake nodded at the right places. He lifted, he measured, he tightened wing nuts until his hands remembered they were hands. Under it all, a bass note pulsed. "She doesn't know. You don't know. Don't sprint." He repeated it like a chant. He repeated it until the words lost their edges and became simply a direction. Steady. For Emma, there was Maple House quiet and an open laptop and an email draft that grew and shrank like breath. She wrote "I'm honored" and changed it to "I'm grateful" and back again. She wrote "I'll be there" and deleted it. She wrote "Can we discuss a hybrid?" and stared at the word hybrid like it was a tool she didn't know how to hold. She closed the laptop and made tea and didn't drink it. She sat on the bed and picked up the letter without opening it, and put it down and picked it up again like she was learning a choreography. Finally, she tore the flap, slow, like the sound itself mattered. The paper inside had been folded and refolded until the creases had memory. She smoothed it, hands careful. "Hi, M," it began. The handwriting hit her first, the same looping certainty as the envelope note, younger and a little cocksure, like a boy trying on a man's voice and getting away with it. "If you're reading this, it means your mom is braver than both of us. She said a letter is a bridge when you're bad at building bridges in person. She's not wrong." Emma laughed, a noise that hurt and helped at the same time. "I don't know where you are when you read this. Maybe you're in a city where the buildings make their own weather. Maybe you're in your room with that terrible poster you refuse to take down. Maybe you're in a train station because that feels like the place between things, and we both like pretending we're in the place between things because it means we don't have to pick a thing. I want you to pick the thing. I want you to pick the thing that makes your chest feel like a window someone opened. If that thing is not me, I will still be breathing. Barely. Don't get a big head. If that thing is me, I will be here. Probably at the coffee shop on Main, drinking something too hot too fast, because I don't learn. I was proud of you before you did anything worth being proud of. I am proud of you for wanting a big life. I'm scared of a life without you. Those two truths sit next to each other like kids who don't know if they're allowed to be friends. I want to believe they are. I love you. Not the 17-year-old you. Not only. I love the you who makes the joke no one else gets, and the you who goes quiet when the song hits the part that sounds like your mom's hands. I love the future you I don't know yet. If I never meet her, I hope she's kind to you. If you come back, you know where to find me. If you don't, you still know where to find me. Emma pressed the paper to her face in that old, childish gesture you do when you're alone, the instinct to smell for the past even when you know it's just paper and ink. Tears surprised her. Not the dramatic kind, but the kind that leave you quieter afterward, like rain on a roof you didn't realize needed washing. She folded the letter, careful new creases crossing old, and stood so fast the room wobbled a little. Coat. Boots. The tin for cookies she'd never brought to choir because she'd been busy not deciding. Outside, snow had started again, soft and intent. Pinebridge looked like a memory and a promise at once. She didn't run. She walked fast, breath showing her where she'd been with every exhale. At the hall, the door stuck and then gave. The room was a busy machine. Voices, chairs, Mrs. Patel clapping in 6 and insisting it was 4. Emma scanned for him and saw the back of his head and the tilt of his shoulders and felt that pull. It wasn't gravity exactly. It was something cousins with it. "Emma," Nora said, appearing in her peripheral like a friendly ghost. "Your face says either cookies or crisis." "Both," Emma said, and then, because the line had to be crossed by someone, "Is he okay?" Nora's eyes softened with that specific kindness friends keep in their back pockets for days like this. "He's trying very hard to be," she said. "He's not mad at you." "I know," Emma said. "That almost makes it worse." "Love is annoying like that," Nora said. "You want a fight, you get patience." Mrs. Patel called for a run-through, and Nora squeezed Emma's hand and moved to her place. Emma stayed at the back, near the soundboard, where a teenager in a Santa hat looked serious about volume. The first chord landed. The altos found the line, the tenors settled under them, the basses came in like a floor you trust with your weight. Jake sang without looking for her. It wasn't a punishment. It was him concentrating on the thing in front of him like a person who knows steadiness isn't an accident. It hurt, and it calmed her at once. On the last verse, the one Mrs. Patel always asked them to sing, "Like you know something true," Emma realized what the letter had given her. Not an answer. Permission to not be afraid of the person she'd be if she chose here, and if she didn't, permission to love him and still go. The sentence was bigger than she'd been letting it be. After rehearsal, the room dissolved into coats and chatter. She moved toward him through the small, friendly chaos and felt suddenly like she was swimming upstream. Eli intercepted with cider and a wink that said, "Go talk." And she did. "Hey," she said. He turned, and his face did that thing again where the careful melts. "Hey." She lifted the letter. "I opened it," she said. "Finally." He swallowed, a tiny, visible concession. "Yeah?" It was... She looked for a word that wasn't everything or too much. "Kind," she said. "It was kind in a way I didn't know how to be to myself back then." He nodded, motion slow, like his whole day had been practice for moving slow. "Your mom said you might need it." "I did," she said. "I still do." He glanced at the door, then back, giving her the choice of public or private. She tipped her head toward the side door, and they slipped into the corridor, where the coat hooks held the town's outer lives. "I don't have an answer," she said, before the corridor could think it was going to get one, "but I have a decision about how I want to answer." "Okay," he said, open palms. "I don't want to make a decision out of fear," she said, each word placed like a foot on ice you trust more than you used to. "Not fear of losing you, not fear of losing me. I want to give this—" She gestured between them, the air warm with it. "More than a week of December. I want to let it be real and ordinary and Tuesday morning. That means I can't say yes to an in-person January like it's the only way to be a real person. I can ask for something else. And if they say no, I'll make a new plan." He looked like a person who'd been gifted air. Then he looked like a person who didn't want to spend it all at once. "That's brave," he said, "and not the kind you do to impress anyone." "I'm tired of that kind," she said. "I'm not choosing a zip code today. I'm choosing a process. I'm choosing to not run." He leaned against the wall and closed his eyes for a second. Just a second. When he opened them, there was that steadiness again, the one she'd learned to read. "I can meet you there," he said. "I can stand still while we figure it out. I can move slow." "Good," she said, "because the world's trying to move fast for me." As if on cue, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't look. He smiled, not jealously, not saintly, just real. "You can answer," he said. "I will," she said, "after I say this next part." He waited. "If it doesn't work, if the job says in person or nothing and your life here is your life here, I don't want us to turn the other into a villain," she said. "I don't want to rewrite this week like it was foolish. It was exactly what it was supposed to be." "I won't," he said, simple. "I won't make you the reason my life is small. My life isn't small." "It isn't," she said, relieved. "It's just here." "And yours is where you put it," he said. They breathed the same air for a while. The corridor hummed with the muffled sound of people putting on boots and arguing about whose hat was whose. Somewhere a child laughed at the discovered joy of mitten strings. Emma's phone buzzed again, then again, polite insistence. She pulled it out, looked at the screen, and then at him. "I'm going to ask for a call tomorrow," she said. "Daytime, in a quiet room. I'm going to say I can lead. Here's how. If you want me, meet me in the middle." "And then?" he asked. "And then I'm going to walk to Daisy's and tell you how it went," she said. "And we're going to eat something with cinnamon and not decide our whole lives in one sitting." His smile arrived slow and landed true. "I can do that." They didn't kiss. It would have been the easy button, and they both had finally learned to be suspicious of those. They touched foreheads for a second, just that, and it felt like the exact right weight of tenderness. A voice from the hall. "Jake, we need your arms," Mrs. Patel called. "Risers are staging a coup." He sighed in a way that made her love him absurdly. "My arms have a union," he called back. 10-minute break. 5, she shouted. "This is a benevolent dictatorship." He grinned at Emma. "See? Logistics and love." She laughed. "Go save the altos." He started down the hall, then turned back. "I don't want to be your layover," he said softly, revisiting the line with new light on it. "But I'll happily be the place you land." She didn't say me too because it was too small. She just nodded, and he seemed to understand the larger sentence behind it. When he disappeared through the door, Emma leaned against the wall and let the tears come. Quiet, private, not dramatic. Relief tears. Decision-adjacent tears. She wiped them with the heel of her hand and exhaled like she hadn't since the email. On the way out, she stopped by the photo tree and found the younger her in the star costume again. The kid in the picture looked certain because someone had told her where to stand and what to hold. Adult certainty was trickier. It asked you to write the script while you performed it. Outside, the snow had deepened. The square looked like a paused movie. She walked back toward Maple House, the letter in her pocket, a warm rectangle against her thigh, the town carrying her like a song that knows your part. At the inn, Mrs. Adler was testing out a new recipe that made the air smell like caramel and risk. "How are we, honey?" she asked, like the town itself, checking in. "Messy," Emma said, smiling. "In a good way." "Then we're doing it right," Mrs. Adler said, and slid a plate across the counter. "Try this. It's either a triumph or a mistake I will eat anyway." Emma took a bite. Triumph. She laughed, surprised and grateful, and went upstairs to her room, where the radiator clicked like a clock that refuses to hurry. She opened her laptop. The draft email blinked. Patient. She began to type, not with the breathless yes of a person trying to outrun fear, but with the calm of someone building a bridge out loud. "Hi. Thank you so much for the offer. I would love to lead Q1. I can deliver everything you're asking at a high level. I'd like to propose a hybrid structure that lets me be in the city for key weeks and remote otherwise. Here's what that looks like." She wrote specifics. She wrote clearly. She wrote like someone who believed she didn't have to choose between being big and being kind. When she hit save, she didn't spiral. She closed the laptop and stood at the window. The square glowed. The tree waited for Friday. Somewhere in town, a boy practiced a trumpet, and the note went wrong, and then went right. Her phone buzzed one more time. Jake, alto coup resolved, barely. Daisy at 7? Emma, 7. I'll bring the cookies this time, I swear. Jake, I'll bring salt. Old habits. Emma, keep that one. She set the phone down, pulled the scarf around her neck just because it smelled a little like cedar and him, and let the room be quiet. Outside, Pinebridge kept being Pinebridge, steadily without asking for applause. Inside, Emma felt something uncomplicated and strong settle in, not an answer. A direction. Pinebridge felt like a held breath on Christmas Eve. By noon, the town had turned into a quiet orchestra of preparation, extension cords untangled like patient snakes, paper lanterns tested and retested, chairs lined in careful rows that made even the most casual seat feel like a reservation. The big tree looked taller somehow, a cathedral of light waiting for its cue. The square smelled like cinnamon, cold air, and the whisper of something about to happen. Emma tied ribbons on the program baskets with Mrs. Adler, who had declared herself Minister of Bows. "Not too tight," Mrs. Adler warned. "We're welcoming hope, not trapping it." Emma laughed and loosened her knot the way you do when someone older than you has earned the right to be metaphorical. Her phone sat face down on the table. The email reply from the city lived in it like a tiny sunrise she was afraid to look at straight on. She'd sent her proposal that morning with hands that didn't shake, bullet points clear and kind, a timeline that felt like a bridge and not a demand. "Meet me in the middle," she'd typed. "I can lead this without losing the parts of my life that make me good at leading." She'd hit send and then gone to cut ribbon, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is something small. Nora arrived with Lucy and Max in scarves big enough to qualify as sleeping bags. "We brought morale," Nora announced. Lucy presented a glitter-covered poster reading, "Sing like you love someone, even if it's a dog." Max handed Emma a candy cane that had clearly been licked and then rewrapped with deep personal conviction. "Perfect," Emma said. "I will treasure this until April." Across the square, Jake and Eli wrestled with a string of lights that had declared itself a philosophy problem. Eli muttered about symmetry. Jake laughed, patient and steady, the sound carrying farther in cold air. Every now and then, he looked toward the church steps, as if to make sure the world where Emma stood still existed, and each time he did, she felt the strange, solid comfort of being checked on without being crowded. As afternoon leaned toward evening, the town gathered. Coats shook off snow. Hats came off to reveal hair with the good kind of static. The chorus collected behind the risers. Mrs. Patel, in a red scarf like a conductor who also knew how to win Christmas. Candles waited in paper cups, unlit, yet promising. The sky dimmed to that deep winter blue that makes warm light look like a promise kept. Emma's phone buzzed once against the wood. She didn't reach for it. Not yet. Jake crossed the square with a box of spare mittens and stopped at the bottom of the steps. He didn't need to say anything. She didn't either. She just lifted a hand like a quiet flag, and he nodded like a person who understands flags. "Ready?" he asked. "Not at all," she said, smiling. "Let's do it." People found seats. Children fidgeted in planetary orbits around their adults. The brass quartet tuned to a truce. Mrs. Patel stepped up and welcomed everyone in a voice that knew how to be warm to a crowd. "We're here to make music and remember that we belong to each other," she said, and the square hummed agreement. The first carol rose. It sounded like Pinebridge, earnest and imperfect in the exact right ratio. The altos found their lane. The tenors made a home. The basses laid a floor. Emma moved along the side aisle with programs, then with candles, then with nothing in her hands at all, because sometimes your job is just to be here. Halfway through, It began to snow, the kind of snow that seems to know it's on camera. Not dramatic, not showy, just a steady sift that made the air visible and the lights turn buttery. Someone behind Emma whispered, "Oh," the word you use when you see something both new and old at once. Between songs, Mr. Finch read a poem about December that made even the teenagers lower their phones. Daisy came up and thanked volunteers and then winked directly at Emma in a way that felt like being told you were doing fine on a test you hadn't studied for. A small girl in a red dress sang 2 verses of "Away in a Manger" with the exact seriousness of a person doing the most important job available to humankind. Emma's phone buzzed again. This time the sound climbed her spine. She slid it from her pocket as if not to startle a bird. The subject line might as well have been written in lights. Q1 lead. Next steps. She didn't open it. Not here. Not with candles and the smell of pine and a town singing like it knew her name. She closed her fist around the phone, felt the edges, and slipped it back into her coat. Decision could be a guest asked to wait in the foyer until it was time. Mrs. Patel lifted her hands. "We'll close with Silent Night," she said softly, "by candlelight. If you're with someone you love, stand closer. If you came alone, stand closer to us." This is the kind of song that makes room. Candles passed hand to hand, flame begetting flame, faces becoming small suns. Emma's wick caught, flared, steadied. She turned and lit Nora's, who lit Lucy's, who looked like she might cry from the simple holiness of holding fire. Emma looked across the crowd and found Jake at the end of the front row of the chorus, his candle cupped in his hand, the light touching his face in a way that rewrote the last few years. The boy she loved, and the man he'd become at the same time. The first note slipped into the night, unaccompanied, and the square joined, 100 throats making one sound. Silent night, holy night. Emma sang. Quietly, not to add volume but to belong. The harmony wrapped around her like a scarf. She felt people breathing together. She felt the town hold her up without asking for anything in return. She felt ready to look. She lowered her eyes to the screen and opened the email. "Emma, we love your proposal. We want you in the lead. Hybrid approved through Q1, with 2 in-person weeks per month. Build the plan and send it after the holiday. Excited to do this with you. D." Emma blinked, then laughed. The quiet kind that leaks out because there's nowhere else for it to go. It wasn't just yes. It was a yes that met her in the middle. She looked up and the world looked the same and entirely different. She felt the answer in her body before she formed the sentence in her head. On the last verse, the one that always felt like a door opening. "Sleep in heavenly peace." Emma stepped toward the steps. She didn't rush. She didn't rehearse. She just moved through the moving air. Mrs. Patel lowered her hands into applause that sounded like mittens and relief. People blew out candles. Children squealed at the puff of smoke. The brass punched a cheerful coda and then faded. Jake set his candle on the riser and scanned, a small crease between his eyes, the kind that says, "Whoever I'm looking for matters." He found her. The crease smoothed. He climbed down like a person who has learned not to sprint, even now. "Hey," he said, "you okay?" She nodded, the word yes living in all her bones. "I am." She swallowed, placed both hands around his forearm like she wanted him to know this was the kind of sentence you anchor. "They said yes," she said, and the relief in her voice made the square brighter in her memory. "Hybrid, 2 weeks in the city, the rest here, if I want it, if we want it." 1,000 reactions rushed the door behind his eyes, and then he picked one. He smiled, the most unshowy smile she'd ever seen. He pressed his lips together like a person trying not to say all the wrong, wonderful things at once. "Of course they did," he said softly. Of course they did, when you asked like that. I didn't make promises I can't keep, she said. I told them what I am and what I'm not. I told them I lead better when my life is full of real things, cocoa and risers and you. He laughed, breath turning to fog between them. I don't know if I'm a real thing or cocoa adjacent. You're salt, she said, and he barked another laugh, startled. That's the least romantic thing anyone has ever called me, he said. It's the most romantic thing I've meant, she said. You keep the road safe. You keep me upright when it's slick. His amusement softened into something like awe, which looked good on him. I can do that, he said. I like doing that. For a second, the noise of the square receded. People hugging, the brass packing up, Daisy telling someone that their candle etiquette was commendable. The snow decided to add a little more sparkle, a conspirator with good timing. I don't want us to be a miracle that only lasts a night, Emma said. Not whispering, not performing, just saying it. I want us to be the thing that happens after the miracle. The part where the lights get turned off and someone remembers to put the leftover cookies in a tin and we both laugh about nothing while doing dishes. Domestic bliss, he said, eyes shining. I own exactly 2 plates. We'll start a registry, she deadpanned. Item 1, a 3rd plate. He reached for her hand, palm up, offering, not taking. She set hers in it. Simple. The square around them went about its business because even miracles have to share space with logistics. Emma, he said, and her name in his mouth sounded like coming home and setting down a bag you've carried too long. I'm not going to ask you to promise me a year or a decade. I'm going to ask you to promise me tonight and tomorrow, and then when tomorrow turns into yesterday, we'll ask again. That's the only contract I trust. Yes, she said, because yes was more than a wedding vow if you said it right and often enough. Yes to tonight and tomorrow. He exhaled, laugh and breath, and the tension that had been strung through his shoulders since the garage let go. He moved closer the way you move when you've learned your lesson about sprinting and still have to get where you're going. He touched her cheek with the back of his fingers, a gesture so careful it made her breath catch. She leaned in like a person who knows what they want and isn't afraid of the word want. And then, because sometimes the world enjoys choreography, a small hush fell. People nearest them did that sweet human thing of pretending not to notice a scene so the scene could happen. The lights of the big tree flickered once, just once, and then steadied, brighter, as if someone had found the switch they'd been saving for the right moment. They kissed. Not a movie kiss that solves history. A real kiss that begins a story. Warm mouth in cold air, the taste of sugar and relief, the feel of a jaw that had learned to unclench. The square didn't cheer. It didn't need to. It just held them. And in being held, they both understood something that rearranged the shape of their fear. When they eased apart, neither of them said anything stupid like forever. They were smarter now. He rested his forehead against hers. She closed her eyes and saw not a montage, but a calendar with small squares you can write real plans on. A bell sounded the hour, 8 or infinity, or some number that meant enough. Mrs. Patel walked by with a coil of cable and didn't break stride. Finally, she muttered, which made Emma laugh into Jake's shoulder. Come on, he said softly. Daisy will kill me if we don't grab hot cocoa before she closes. And Eli will never forgive us if we miss his post-show wreath critique. As they moved through the crowd slowly, because people like to bless good things by bumping into them. Mr. Finch shook Jake's hand and squeezed Emma's arm. The little girl in the red dress informed them, I sang all the words, and Emma told her she had, in fact, saved Christmas. Mrs. Adler kissed Emma on the cheek and whispered, permission granted, which made no sense and all the sense. At Daisy's, the windows fogged instantly with bodies and joy. Daisy slid 2 cocos their way without being asked. Extra whipped cream, cinnamon-like snowfall. What did I miss? She asked, even though Daisy never missed anything. Nothing, Emma said, meaning everything. Just Lights. Best kind of news, Daisy said. They took the booth by the window because some rituals are not negotiable. Outside, snow made its quiet case for itself. Inside, the cocoa smelled like childhood and a future she wanted. Emma set her phone on the table between them and turned it so the screen faced up. Hybrid approved, it said. Still surreal and perfectly ordinary. The way good news always is once it becomes your life. Jake glanced, nodded, didn't make a speech. "What are you doing for New Year's?" he asked. "Not sprinting," she said. "Maybe a walk, maybe soup, maybe learning to be bad at ice skating." "I'm excellent at being bad at ice skating," he said. "I can teach you." "Deal," she said. "And January?" "January we build a calendar," he said, smiling into his cup. "We pencil things in. We use erasers without guilt. We put Daisy in charge of snacks." "Mrs. Adler will unionize the snacks," she said. He reached across the table and traced a small heart on the condensation of her cup with his fingertip, then pretended he hadn't. The heart slid a little, then held. She watched it for a second and felt everything that mattered line up in a way that didn't require applause. They didn't talk about forever. They talked about Tuesday. They talked about who would shovel whose steps if the next storm was rude. They talked about a Valentine's Day that might be a walk in a park with snowbanks and pink cheeks. They let the miracle be small, because small miracles are the ones that survive. Later, when they stepped back into the night, the tree performed its quiet duty. The square had thinned to silhouettes and footsteps. The mural jars in the alley trembled and steadied in the breeze. Somewhere, people were washing punch bowls and counting candles. The town was doing its after-party work, the holy labor of making beauty possible again tomorrow. Jake tucked her hand into his elbow, a simple, old-fashioned act of companionship. "Walk you to Maple House?" he asked. "Please," she said, and the word meant everything it needed to. They crossed under the lights. The snow made that soft sound like a secret being kept well. At the corner, they paused inside the lamppost's golden circle the way they always seemed to. He kissed her temple, light and sure. "Tonight and tomorrow," he said. "Tonight and tomorrow," she echoed. They stood there long enough to memorize it without making an idol of it, then walked on, not rushing, the town holding them with its steady, ordinary miracle. 3 months later, Pinebridge learned how to be winter without being severe. The snow pulled back from the sidewalks and hid under shrubs like a shy guest. Icicles let go one by one with tiny, glassy sighs. Mornings came blue and thin. Afternoons stretched farther each week. The town kept its lights up longer than strictly necessary, not because it was stubborn, but because joy takes time to put away neatly. Emma's days found a shape that didn't feel like a compromise. On city weeks, she took the early train with a thermos from Daisy and a scarf that now permanently smelled like cedar and cinnamon. She stepped into lobbies with marble floors, rode elevators where people practiced confidence in reflective doors, led meetings with a kind of calm that surprised even her. She was good at the work. She didn't apologize for that anymore. Between calls, she'd text a photo of something ordinary. A pigeon marching like a mayor, a coffee that tried too hard, a stranger helping a stroller over a curb. And Jake would send back something ordinary from Pinebridge. A wrench balanced on a bumper like a poem. Mrs. Adler's experimental scones, Pray for Us, Max's drawing of a truck with eyelashes. On Pinebridge weeks, she slept like the town taught her. She helped Nora glue googly eyes onto construction paper flowers that looked like they knew they were ridiculous. She stood at the garage counter and watched Jake talk a worried teenager through the heartbreak of a check engine light. She learned which aisles in the hardware store felt like portals, and that Mr. Finch always hid a copy of something he wanted her to read behind a stack of things everyone else wanted to read. She made soups that tasted like patience and asked to learn how to sharpen skates badly, then better, then almost okay. They didn't sprint. They didn't draw up a blueprint of love and then grade themselves against it. They asked each other, often, tonight and tomorrow, and said yes as if the word were a small daily ceremony. The yes got easier to say and more meaningful each time. On a Tuesday that didn't try to be anything else, Emma took a meeting from the Maple House sitting room. Snow still ringed the porch steps, sun turning it into sugar. She presented a roadmap on shared screens and made 3 people in 3 cities feel like they could do hard things. When the call ended, she closed the laptop and the room expanded, full of radiator clicks and a plant that Mrs. Adler refused to admit she talked to. Her phone buzzed. Jake. Lunch at Daisy's? They have a chili that comes with a sermon about cumin. She smiled. Emma. 10 minutes. Bring your coaster energy. Jake. Already in my pocket. He met her at the door with the small gold heart ornament in his coat pocket, the one he hadn't bought at the winter market that day. He'd gone back later, alone, because some choices feel truer when no one is watching. Now it lived on a nail by his kitchen window, catching afternoon light and turning it into something he pretended not to notice. He told her about it one night, like a person confessing a nice thing by accident. She'd cried in that quiet way that makes you grateful for your own face. At Daisy's, the bell did its cheerful ding. Daisy delivered bowls like a conductor finishing an overture. Taste, she ordered. Tell me if the cumin is bossy. It's confident, Emma said. It's leadership forward, Jake said. Good, Daisy said, satisfied. I like my spices employed. They ate. They talked about nothing, and the kind of nothing that ends up being everything. A new mural proposal, a pothole making a name for itself on Maple, the library's idea for a seed library that everyone pretended to understand immediately. Behind them, 2 teenagers pretended not to be on a date. In the corner, Mr. Finch underlined something in a book, then smiled like the sentence had remembered him. You going in next week? Jake asked, wiping cornbread crumbs from his fingers. First week, she said. 2 days of rooms, 1 day of walking between them, 1 day of convincing a CFO that humans are not calendars. Back Friday if no one hides my laptop. She poked his wrist with her spoon. You okay if I leave the soup prototype with you? Test audience of 1? I'm honored, he said. I will provide notes in triplicate. They walked out with to-go cups for later. Eli waved from the florist, hands green with cedar again, because he had decided seasonal greenery was a lifestyle, not a calendar. Come by later, he called. I got ranunculus that could fix a mood. Our moods are under warranty, Jake said. Extended, Emma added. Eli clutched his chest. Disgusting. I love it. In the afternoon, Emma stopped by the school to watch Lucy in a music class demonstration where 24 recorders tried their best. The sound was earnest. Nora cried anyway. Max attempted to sell Emma a friendship bracelet at a markup. She bought 3 and left a tip that ensured a future criminal enterprise. Outside, snowmelt ran along the curb in clear little streams that looked confident about spring. At the garage, a man brought in a snowblower that had survived things it shouldn't have. It's singing, he said, in a bad way. Jake listened, like a doctor with a stethoscope, and then said, belts and hope. Udi! He glanced up as Emma came in, eyes doing that small, soft thing she still wasn't used to being the cause of. Walk later? He asked. Always, she said. They met at the river trail just before dusk. Winter light blurred the edges of the trees. The water moved like it had a secret. Their steps fell into that easy sink they'd stopped trying to explain. When a breeze found the space between her collar and scarf, he tugged it up without commentary. She slid a hand into his coat pocket because that was where it wanted to be. Eli wants to add more jars to the mural, he said. Says we need spring jars. What does that even mean? She asked. He says winter jars flicker and spring jars glow, Jake said. I told him physics disagrees. He told me to send physics to his shop and he'd sell it a wreath. They reached the courtyard. The mural was still there, of course, pines and river and the paper boat under a sky punctured with careful stars, but now someone had painted the faintest line of dawn along the far trees. A small thing, easy to miss. Eli had indeed added jars. Some held moss and tiny cut paper birds. Late sun slid through glass and made soft rectangles on brick. Emma sat, their bench as cold as always and somehow hospitable anyway. "What's the opposite of a miracle?" she asked. "Bad timing?" he tried. "I think it's ignoring small good things," she said, eyes tracking a speck of something floating in the glass. "I used to be good at that, blinking at the wrong time." "You're getting worse at it," he said, which she accepted as the compliment it was. He reached into his coat, pulled out a folded sheet of paper and handed it to her, an invoice copy, grease-smudged with his blocky printing. "What's this?" "Calendar," he said. "Not a forever one. Just next month. Your city weeks and your Pinebridge weeks. I penciled in choir rehearsals, Mrs. Adler's birthday, and a reminder to buy salt, even if it doesn't snow, because buying salt when it's sunny makes me feel like I'm getting away with something." She smoothed it on her knee, a laugh rising that turned into something gentler mid-ride. "You put in walk on 3 Tuesdays. "Ambitious," he said. "I'm willing to negotiate down to 2. "No," she said, pretending to consult legal counsel. 3 holds. They walked back past the square while the streetlights yawned themselves awake. Finch and Fable's cat sat in the window, regarding the lengthening day with aristocratic suspicion. Daisy flipped the sign to closed and then reopened it because Mrs. Adler knocked with a look that clearly meant urgent pastry. They didn't kiss goodnight at the corner because it wasn't night yet and there were soup leftovers to consider. They sat in his kitchen with bowls and spoons and the small radio that only found 2 stations. One that played anything with a guitar, one that played anything with bells. Jake's dad complained affectionately about a game on TV and asked Emma if she'd learned to parallel park in the city without cry-laughing. She admitted no, and he nodded solemnly, like the truth had set them all free. Later, Emma stood at the kitchen window and looked at the little gold heart hanging from a nail. The sunset got inside it and turned it into a coin of light. She reached up, touched it with one finger, then turned back to Jake, who was reading repair forums like they were literature. "I have to be back in the city next Wednesday," she said. "I'll drive you to the station," he said, "and I will not make a speech about trains." "You can make a small speech," she said, "as a treat." He grinned. "We're getting good at this." "We're getting good at asking," she corrected. "That's different." He stood and came to her, hands in his pockets, like a man who'd learned to offer before taking. "Tonight and tomorrow?" he asked. "Tonight and tomorrow," she said, and they held the sentence together like a shared handle. Spring happened the way it always does, suddenly, then slowly, then all at once. The river ran brighter. Kids pretended jackets were a conspiracy. The mural's jars glowed, Eli insisted, at sunset. Mrs. Adler planted pansies in window boxes and told them to be brave. Daisy introduced a lemon bar that made the entire alto section temporarily reconsider doctrine. Emma's hybrid rhythm stuck. In the city, she led with her full voice and remembered to go outside at lunch. In Pinebridge, she picked up paint chips for a shelf Jake swore he was going to build. He did. And carried heavy bags of birdseed for a woman who said her cardinals had standards. On weekends, they made small trips that didn't try to become big trips. The next town over for a farmer's market where bread smelled like singing, the hill on the edge of Pinebridge where you could see both water towers if you squinted and stood on hope. They fought once, then twice, about things not dramatic enough for a song, but important enough for a life, whose plan got to be the plan, on a day when 2 good plans collided, whether silence meant comfort or avoidance. They apologized in ways that felt new, not by giving up ground, but by meeting on it. They said, "I'm scared," and practiced not rescuing each other from the truth. One evening, when the first leaves were the size of a squirrel's ear, Mrs. Adler's measurement system, the town gathered again. No candles this time, just a long table down the middle of Maple Street with mismatched chairs and a tablecloth that seemed to be made of everyone's grandmother's linen leftovers. A spring potluck, someone had called it, because naming a thing makes it easier to show up. Eli hung new jars. Max wore a tie because he'd been told it was not necessary. Mr. Finch read a poem about Thor that made Daisy throw a napkin at him and then pretend she hadn't. The brass quartet tried a waltz and discovered they were better at marches. People ate deviled eggs like a sport. Children drew flowers in chalk, then lay down and let someone trace them, their outlines becoming petals. Emma stood at the end of the table for a moment and watched the town breathe. Jake came up beside her with 2 forks and a plate that was a dangerous topography of salads and pies, and something that might have been a trifle if trifle had grown up in a log cabin. "Quality control," he said, offering the fork, "for science." She took a bite. Lemon, sugar, a little salt. "Leadership forward," she said. He laughed. "You're terrible," he said. "I love that about you." They didn't announce anything. There was nothing to announce yet except this, that they were here, and then here again, and then here some more. That Emma would wake up in the city on some Wednesdays and in Pinebridge on others, and both would feel like versions of home her body trusted. That Jake would label jars in his kitchen with dates and strange notes, soup, and sometimes buy salt on sunny days because it still felt like an inside joke with the sky. As the light slid sideways and made the jars look like captive sunsets, Lucy tugged on Emma's sleeve. "Are you staying forever now?" she asked, as children ask. Because for them the calendar is a ladder with every rung exactly the same distance from the next. Emma crouched. "I'm staying tonight," she said, "and tomorrow, and a lot of days after that. And on the days I'm not, I'm coming back. That's our plan. It's a good one." Lucy considered this with proper gravitas. "Okay," she said, satisfied. Also Max ate chalk. "Great," Emma said. "That's a Tuesday." After dessert and a last song and 3 false goodbyes, the town started to gather itself back up. People folded tables like mapmakers agreeing on borders. The jars came down gently one by one. Someone swept confetti out of the gutter with a broom that had opinions. The square didn't look magical. It looked used and loved, which is better. Jake and Emma walked the long way home, which in Pinebridge is every way. They crossed by Finch and Fable, where the cat had finally decided to like one single person, a toddler with jam hands. They paused at the mural. The paper boat had a painted reflection now, subtle, rippled, imperfect. Eli had explained it earlier with a shrug. Sometimes the thing you're looking at needs to know it exists twice. "Do you ever miss certainty?" Emma asked, fingers in his pocket again, the gesture as familiar as breath. "Sometimes," he said. "Then I remember certainty is just a story certainty wrote about itself." He glanced at her, grin crooked. "I prefer this." "What's this?" she asked. "Every day," he said. She leaned her head on his shoulder, the small weight a habit their bones had learned. "I like every day," she said. "It's underrated." They stopped under the lamppost that had seen them through 100 almosts and exactly as many yeses. Light pooled at their feet, warm and ordinary. "Tonight and tomorrow?" he asked, out of reverence as much as routine. "Tonight and tomorrow," she said. He kissed her, small, sure, the kind of kiss that knows the difference between a threshold and a living room. When they parted, neither of them looked up for a sign. They didn't need one. They walked on, 2 figures in a town that had learned their steps, passing windows where other lives were happening, dishes, homework, someone dancing alone with a dish towel microphone. Behind them, the mural jars caught the last slice of light and held it just a little longer than physics required. If there was a miracle, it wasn't loud. It was this: a calendar with pencil marks that didn't have to be traced over in ink to matter. A letter kept where you can reach it when you forget what you decided to believe. A town that remembers your coat size, and a city that remembers your nameplate, and a person who remembers your laugh from 2 rooms away. Sometimes the miracle isn't that love found you. It's that you stayed long enough to recognize it, and gentle enough to keep letting it in, tonight and tomorrow.